We often see and hear stories about great leadership examples, things that have happened in the past that are worth passing on when a leader's made a great decision or handled something in an outstanding way. But we rarely hear about poor leadership examples. And looking back over my career, I think I've experienced a few of those. I wanted to capture some of those, the ones that sort of come to mind when I think about them, because we can often learn as much from a lesson of poor leadership as we can from a lesson of good leadership. And there may even be one or two that I've been the cause of. Let's get those out too, because I've made some shocking leadership decisions in my career also. And I can certainly learn from those, so you probably can too. One that sprung to mind that made me record this video was, this is going back, must be over 25 years ago. And I was at the beginning of my leadership journey. So I was now running functions in organizations. I'd been called into what I would call a heritage technology business. So they were a combination of hardware and software, and were really struggling to make that transition into a more software-oriented world where their heritage had been in the hardware with a little bit of software on top. So I've been brought in theory, to turn around the technology and the technology team. And what became very, very clear to me within the first few days was it actually wasn't the technology and the technology team that needed turning around. It was actually the leadership that needed turning around. We had a very, very traditional CEO, a very autocratic, very dictatorial, who seemed to think that the business was his plaything, that was there just to do exactly what he said, when he said it, and how he said it. And he left the rest of the leadership team very, very little scope or leeway to actually lead. And that was possibly in part because they weren't a great leadership team, so he felt that he had to do that. Not forgiving that at all. No, that's not the right way to run a business, as we all know. But things came to a head pretty quickly. So having just been brought in to turn around the technology team, within about 2 or 3 months, it became clear that the business had some serious financial cash flow issues. And after about 4 months in, we were all called into the conference room, the boardroom, and we were told that the business had run out of money and that they'd called the administrators in and they were going to wind up with the business. So what happened from there? Yes, the business did get wound up, but one of the leaders of one of the functions, he was actually head of sales and marketing, he put a bid in for the company and he won. So he bought the business back from the administrators, much to the annoyance of the previous managing director, who felt it was his business. Well, it was, but he'd run it into the ground. So this new leader came in, this new managing director came in, and I remember very much on the first day where the business was under his control, he brought the whole team together. Sounds like a good thing. He brought us all into the conference room and he said, okay, I'm the new head of the company, but you are the people who know the company. So I'm going to leave the room and I want you to put a plan together for how we recover the business and how we move on. And I was just astonished. How is this leadership? Now, if he had given us his vision, if he had set the North Star for where he wanted to take the business, then that might have been okay. But in effect, what he did is he came in and he said, I'm now in charge and I'm abdicating all of my accountability and all of my responsibility over to you guys. You make it happen. So what actually happened? Well, we gave it a good go, but without really knowing where he wanted to take the business, we had no idea of how to lay out a plan to get there. Because if you don't have a North Star, if you don't have somewhere to aim at, how on earth can you put together a plan that's going to get you there? So long story short, we did put a plan together, but because we didn't know where he wanted to take it, we ended up just fumbling around. And I ended up leaving the business about 6 months later because I just could not work for a business that lacked that level of leadership, but more importantly, the level of direction that was going to allow us to be able to make the decisions that we needed to make to get there. So I left and ended up moving back into consulting and running large consulting teams at a tier 1 consulting company in the UK. But that in my mind is one of the bad leadership lessons that we can learn from. So don't abdicate your accountabilities and your responsibilities as a leader. Now, you can always offer them up to someone else who's going to take ownership, but just walking out the room and leaving everyone to it is not the way to lead. Never, ever, ever.